Hey guys, welcome back to Honeycomb Manila. My name is Keo, and today we are going to be brewing with a brew method that I actually invented and developed for the Brewers Cup a couple of years ago. Now, this brew method is unique in a couple of ways, and some of you might see it and say, oh, this is just that, this is just this, and I'll dive into that later. And if you have questions, I can answer them in the comments. But first, let's just go through the brew method so that you guys can try it at home. Now, the idea behind this brew method, which I have lovingly nicknamed Immercolation, and it's a hybrid method, is that I wanted to take the mouthfeel and that full-bodiedness that we got from immersion methods like French press or even cupping, and combine that with some of the more exciting results that we were getting from pour-overs like V60s or origamis, Kalita Wave. And you know, when you're brewing coffee, you kind of are forced to choose one or the other. And I'm stubborn and I thought, why can't I just have both? Maybe there's a way that I can get all of the flavors that I want and the mouthfeel that I want by combining those two methods, extracting those flavors at different points in the brew process. So what we ended up with is a brew method that immerses the coffee in the first half of the brew process at a very stable temperature with vacuum pressure, and then we do a pour over to percolate through that coffee for a second pulse, a second round of brewing. What you need for this brew process is first you need a thermos. So this is a thermal jug, double wall, stainless steel, food grade, and I actually picked this up for only 300 pesos, if I remember correctly, at MINISO. But there's no way, I think it was 300. There's no way that this thing was like 500 pesos. It was really cheap, but good quality, and important, I only use this for coffee ever. So I don't use this for anything else but coffee. And I think this is a really good example of how your brew equipment doesn't need to cost an arm and a leg, and you don't need to, pay a lot to experiment. You can use what's available to you and what you can afford to get better coffee results. On the way into there, you need a funnel. So the funnel is used for getting the coffee, once it's ground, into the thermos. And then from the thermos, we're gonna decant the coffee, or the slurry I should say, into a pour over cone. In this case, we are using the origami dripper. Now, the origami dripper is great for a couple of reasons, but before I go into that, let's look at this. This is the plastic V60, and I use the plastic V60 as an origami holder because it's a very efficient way to hold an origami and move it around, and it's very stable. But also because the plastic V60 is what I used in competition. So I actually developed this brew method to compete in the Brewers Cup, where I got a really good score, and I'm very happy to have finished first runner-up in our Philippine Brewers Cup event. And back then, I didn't have an origami dripper, so I used the plastic V60. And the reason why I chose the plastic V60 is because it vents temperature very efficiently. So it actually gets up the temperature quickly, and then it allows heat to dissipate from the device in a way that ceramic just doesn't. And I wanted the temperature to drop quickly because inside the thermos, the temperature doesn't drop at all. In fact, once the liquid goes into the thermos, there is an immediate drop in temperature, and then it ramps up relatively quickly and stabilizes at only about a 3-degree drop. So in our case, we're going to be brewing with 96-degree water, and then it's going to drop to about 93 degrees almost immediately, but at which point it's not going to change again. It's going to stay stable at 93 degrees inside the thermos for at least an hour. So I actually tested the thermos, and the drop in temperature over an hour is about 1 degree, or a fraction of 1 degree. So once the water goes in, it's going to be 93 degrees. So when I decant it out for our second stage of brewing, I want the temperature to drop or to vent very quickly so that I can get to a more comfortable brewing temperature here in the brewer. And kind of that profiling of temperature is going to result in a very interesting profile for this coffee. You need a filter. You can use a cone filter. In this case, we're using the origami cone filter, but you can use a V60 filter with a V60, obviously. And then finally, we have our coffee. And the reason why I wanted to do this video now was because I found an ideal coffee for immercolation. So I should say that immercolation does not work for every coffee, right? You don't have brew methods that are one size fits all, at least not in more advanced levels. So I found that this works very well with high elevation, dense coffees. And that's what we have here, a relatively dense Panama Canberra Geisha from 90 Plus Estates. And I'd like to say thank you to Gio Visitacion, our current Philippine Brewers Cup champion, for sending this over from his cafe and roastery in Cebu, the Good Cup Coffee Company. I did an unboxing where I featured this coffee. And once I tested out the method with the coffee, I thought, you know what, this is a perfect example for making an immercolation brew. Now, when the slurry is coming out of the thermos, there's a tendency for coffees that are not dense to get stuck inside. So you want a dense coffee so that all of the slurry comes out when you're brewing. But I will say that this is one of the best coffees I've tasted all year, and you can order directly from the Good Cups website. I'll put the link somewhere here. And they deliver in like 48 hours. It's amazing. Now, one thing to note while you are doing this method is that you need to use an additive way of counting your weights in this coffee. So the actual coffee beans going in is going to be 15 grams. Times 15 for a 1:15 ratio, you have 225. So our ratio will be 15 grams of coffee to 225 grams of water. But we will not be tearing our scale because we need to know the total amount of mass being used because of the transfer process of getting the coffee from the flask into the cone. So it sometimes happens that coffee will get stuck inside the flask. If that happens, we're going to add 10 grams of water to the flask to wash it out, which means we need to know the total weight of all of the coffee inside the brewer, and then we're going to pour over through the slurry the remaining amount of water so that we get up to our total brew weight of 225 plus 15, which is 240 grams. So yeah, let's get to brewing. We've ground our coffee on the Baratza SETI 270, which is one of my favorite grinders because it grinds a little bit finer than your usual brew grinders. And I think that that's a feature, not a bug. And then you remember to zero out your scale before you put the funnel on top. So now when we add things into the scale, we know that it's going to be zeroed out correctly. And we're going to put our coffee in through the funnel. Make sure we get it all in there. And that's 15 grams of coffee. All right, so at this point, your temptation is to press that tear button. Do not do it. Remember, we're doing additive for all of our weights. And I'm going to press the timer. Start timer. I'm just going to twist this a little bit just to make sure that everything gets wet. And then I'm going to center pour. Try and get everything in 15 seconds. And we'll close it up. While that's extracting, I am going to wet my filter inside my origami dripper, and that's going to heat up the whole thing. All right, so what's happening inside here is that we're extracting the coffee through an immersion process, but that there's a micro amount of vacuum as the carbon is released, the carbon dioxide is released from the coffees. It's going to get stuck inside the vacuum jug, and that creates kind of a second level of extraction using micro amounts of pressure and that same carbon dioxide which usually you want removed from the coffee because it makes sour flavors supposedly, but we're going to utilize it instead because it is a part of the coffee. It is a naturally occurring byproduct from the way that we make the coffee, and that's going to give us some extra flavor, is my experience. So that's the difference between doing this in a double wall or doing it in, say, a Chemex, which was my original vessel for the immersion stage. So we'll empty out the water from the jug, and now I will tare my scale. Okay. Coming up on 2 minutes, I'm going to open up the jug, and you can actually hear sometimes the vacuum release from the jug. All right, it's been about 2 minutes. I'm going to give this a little swirl to get any of those particles that are stuck suspended, and 2 minutes 20, I'm gonna pour. Now look that I'm pouring at an angle so that all of the slurry spins around already into a spinning fashion. Now I'm looking in there to see if there's any coffee left behind. There's a tiny bit, so I'm just going to add a little bit of water in, get that out, and pour it into the slurry. All right, so now there's no more coffee inside that vacuum jug, and we have 136 grams. If you remember, our total weight in was 130, I think. So we only add 6 grams of water to get the rest out, and now we are going to let this water draw down. Hopefully that's down by about 3 minutes 20 seconds, and then I'm going to pour a second round of water through there until this gets to 240 grams. We're right on schedule. Now I'm doing a circle pour to agitate the coffee, and then another circle pour till we get to 240 grams. And that's it. We're gonna let this draw down. All right, while we're waiting for that to draw down, let's talk a little bit about our 90 plus temp geisha. One of the things that I love about Panama coffees, particularly Panama geishas, but Panama coffees in general, is that Panama has a very unique microclimate where they have the Caribbean Sea on one side and the Pacific Ocean on the other, and hot winds are coming in from the Caribbean Sea, it being a relatively shallow body or smaller body of water versus the Pacific Ocean, which brings a lot of cool winds in, and that exchange of pressure and constant wind makes for a very unique microclimate. All right, the water's finished draining. 4 minutes 53 seconds. Seems good to me. On the nose, chocolate, very bold chocolate, and there's like some tropical fruits. There's a mangosteen in there. Let's taste it. Off the bat, beautiful body, deep chocolate. The chocolate is deeper than, I actually tried this as an exploded method before and then did a regular origami brew. And this is a deeper chocolate experience in the, with the immersion stage. There's some nice fermented, it's not like a liquor fermentation. It's more like those small bananas when they're slightly overripe, and mangosteen. Sometimes I try to avoid saying strawberry as a tasting note or blueberry because they're kind of obvious, but this has a very clear, fresh strawberry in there. Altogether, I would describe this as a kind of a dark chocolate dipped strawberry. And then in the finish, you have that nice that nice little banana. If you guys know the name of that little sweet banana that we have here in the Philippines, please leave it in the comments. I don't remember the name, but it is that little like señorita style little banana. Then a clear strawberry, very clear strawberry. It's interesting because it pops in and out. You know how when you tune a guitar and like the harmonics, you hear like the sounds that are pretty close together but not quite the same, kind of vibrating against each other. That's very much a sensation that you're getting here flavor wise. I can't identify a specific kind of sweetness, if it's sugary. On the packaging here, it says flavor profile butterscotch strawberries. There you go. Rum, cacao nibs. Definitely getting the chocolate. I don't know if it's a cacao nib. I would say that it was more like a deep dark chocolate. And the strawberries, definitely yes. The butterscotch, if it's referring to a kind of sweetness, I could see that, but I think that the sweetness is more like a fruity sweetness. Some great levels of acidity. It tastes like candy. It really does. It tastes like, it's very decadent. And I mean, it was a 3 minutes, almost, it was an almost 5 minute extraction, 4 minutes 50. A lot of people will tell you that's too long. I disagree. This coffee is great. And I really believe that when you brew coffee, you need to maximize what you're getting out of that coffee all the time. And this, you know, as much as I like coffees that have that tea-like quality to them when they're very diluted, this particular coffee is great, in your face, full-bodied, with all of that juicy sweetness in the brew. This is a delicious coffee. I have a very nice pie plate here in my origami. And the grounds are very fine, but there's no astringency, no bitterness in this coffee. And I like to go as fine as you can when you're when you're selecting coffee. I mean, if you look at this, we broke a ton of rules. This coffee is super fine. The water temperature is 96 degrees, really hot the whole time. We went to 4 minutes 53 seconds in the brew process, and we used cheap equipment. So in theory, this goes against everything that they teach you, but the coffee tastes fantastic. So try this at home. Let me know what you think. In our coffee box, such a good coffee. Now, before we wrap up, let's take a last minute to talk about the 90 Plus Canberra Geisha, which we talked a lot about the flavors, but I do want to mention it is 1,600 meters above sea level. It is varietal geisha, of course, and then it is a anaerobic natural from this year's harvest. So it's a beautiful, freshly harvested green, probably from Q1 of 2020, and it's from Volcan, Panama. Nice. So that's the volcanic region of Panama, and made by 90 Plus Geisha Estates. All right, so one of the things I love about this area, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but I'll say it again, the biodiversity in Panama is fantastic. You have all those birds flying through. There are more birds that fly through that little stretch of Panama where the continents join together at an elbow. All the birds fly through there, and there are more birds flying through that rainforest than there are in all of North America at any given time. So lots of biodiversity, lots of bugs in the ground turning stuff over. This is a beautiful rainforest coffee, and this goes to show what you can do with a beautiful rainforest with that kind of terroir. You know what though? Philippines has a lot of that stuff too. We have the elevation, we have volcanic soil, we have the big Pacific Ocean on one side and the West Philippine Sea, a smaller body of water on the other side, giving that same hot-cold wind transfer. I forget what they call it in Tagalog. It's like amihan and something, right? The switching winds. and then a high amount of migratory birds moving through the area. So yeah, isn't that super exciting? A flavor like this from a terroir like that, and we live somewhere, or at least I live somewhere, on an island where we can get a lot of those same characteristics. What a great coffee. Congratulations to 90 Plus Estates and Joseph Brodsky, and the Good Cup, of course, Gio Visitacion, for making such a great coffee for us to taste. And hopefully you guys can enjoy the Immercolation brew method yourself. I wish you good luck. I wish you good health. Stay safe, y'all. Wash your hands and wear a mask. Peace.